Well, kia ora and another video. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about what's known as imprints. And I guess to start with, to say, this is coming from a perspective of perinatal psychology, and just a quick background on that. It sort of involves a range of different modalities, including neurobiology, epigenetics, perinatal theoretical understanding, consciousness studies, and also around birth process and the energetics of our nervous system and formation of our embryonic life. And so it can be a little bit of a paradigm shift, and I like paradigm shifts because they get us to consider other perspectives and ideas, and sometimes they just make sense. And for me, I found that this work is really makes sense, particularly in our formative experience. So how we end up with the belief structures and um, gestures and postures and things that we walk around in our everyday with. And it makes me curious that when is it that we develop our psychological patterns or patterning? How does that form? And I'm a big fan of the work of osteopaths, and I myself practice biodynamic craniosacral therapy, and very influenced by those in that field. And Dr. James Jellis, spoke about the embryonic mind, and have quite a passion for embryology and just the intricacies and how we develop in that environment and what influences impact our system development, so our nervous system, our all our other systems within our body. And so it's this, and then it gets me curious about our psychological patterning, our belief structures, and where do these come from? And in the perinatal world, the perinatal psychology world, there's a phenomenon known as what we call imprints. And imprints are like the undigested, unmetabolized experiences that we absorb as little ones, either in utero or very close to throughout our birth process. And there's a lot of talk now about the first 2,000 days, and it's because these imprints that we absorb usually and very rarely don't get recognized. So when we arrive here, sometimes we have an imprint of not being discovered or not being wanted, or maybe the environment we're coming into and the hospital setting has some sort of chaotic energy to it. And all of these influences for little ones have a deep impact on our orientation and organization in life. And so what tends to happen is that when they are unacknowledged and left unmetabolized and unintegrated within us, we tend to develop belief structures around them. And sometimes these beliefs are not even ours, they're from our ancestral imprinting, and there's many theories around how that happens. So we have the new sort of field of what's called epigenetics, or how the epigenome is turned on and off in the most simplest form that influences our cellular expression. There's the theories around cellular memory, and how cells can actually remember, and they actually have their own preferences, and they'll move towards something or away from something based on the stimulus. And then there's these larger philosophical perspectives as well around psyche and soul, and sometimes poets are better at describing soul, particularly than some sort of theory, because soul in this context doesn't really like to be put into a box. That's sort of one of the qualities of what using the term soul, and there's many names for that and many languages for that, and but it's very mercurius, and alchemy really explains that process quite well as well. So the old alchemists of old, and so and Carl Jung's work, with his psychology speaks about, his psychology is just an extension of alchemy. But coming back to these imprints, what I'm really getting at here is that no matter what sort of lens or perspective we come through, I'm coming from a perinatal lens today, is that bottom line is something in us remembers. Something in us remembers, and I see this time and time again in process workshops when we're really exploring these early places and formative experiences in people, and it's amazing what happens when we orientate the field to a sense of safety and acknowledge what's occurred, and the absolute transformation that occurs is pretty phenomenal and blows my mind, surprises me all the time, and super love that work. So if you're interested in that, get in touch. But it is a bit of a deep dive. But coming back to these imprints, is that bottom line, something remembers, and particularly as little ones, we absorb things super quick. Like they become super embedded in us, really quite. It's like we're always sponges, and we absorb what's in that environment, and that influences how we are in the world, in our adult world. Actually, the origins of a lot of our beliefs in adulthood actually start right back in utero, depending on the environment that we're coming into. So a concrete example of this is, if for just speaking of my own example, is that I was born as a twin, and what happened was that my brother was born, and then there was a epidural given and some anesthesia, and what it did is it disorientated me about 3/4 of the way through my physiological birth process, which ended up meaning that I came out breech, which is cool here. Well, but what happened is the pattern throughout my life was recapitulated. It's a term that we use in pre and perinatal psychology. It's like recapitulated throughout my life, and what that meant was that I would get 3/4 of the way through something, and then there'd just be this absolute lack of motivation or collapse, and that was a recapitulation of the anesthesia. So happy to have repatterned that and gone and explored that in some depth, and that's been quite the liberation, really. And that's the beauty of these imprints, is that when we turn towards them, we turn towards them in a way that is held with a lot of reverence and safety and support. It's some mutual support and cooperation, and work it out together. So very relational. What tends to happen is that underneath the imprints is our original potential. Like if we were to organize and orientate to the world as our original potential, or I think what James Hillman talked about was the acorn theory. You've got all this potential like an acorn to be an oak tree. And what happens is, as we move into the world, or if you're talking about consciousness coming in, it's imprinted in a way that compensates to ensure that we fit in, or that we belong, because it's one of our preeminent needs to belong and to be attached in relationship. But sometimes that means that we have sort of compensations that occur, and these compensations become part of our physiology, and as they become part of our physiology, that influences our psychological patterning. So, for example, if I've had a experience where I've had to reorganize something during my early nervous system development, maybe I'm now operating from a place in my nervous system, like a baseline place of a lot of speed, so I can have a lot of speed going on, or something's occurred where I really need to stay in my head because it's really unsafe to inhabit my body. And these are all sort of imprints that we're influenced by, and underneath this imprint is like this blueprint of potential, like the absolute gift. And so these imprints are like a doorway into potential. And it's amazing to see someone's psychological and physiological or mind-body reorganize around their original potential, and how that sort of really emerges and starts to bubble up in life. And maybe asking, why would I do this? Like, why? And so a couple of reasons. One, I'm super passionate about those that are going to be welcoming in little ones, that they be curious about what is it that they're bringing into that field or environment, and what imprints are there, and what do they not want to pass on. We're always wanting the best for our children, so how do I do a little bit of work on myself to make sure that actually that belief, it's not true, it's not mine, and so I don't want my child to have that. That's one example. And so new parents may like to sort of explore these dynamics. It can be quite rich. It can be tender, but it can be beautifully rich. And then the other reason is that it's about community. And what I mean by that is that, when we truly get to access our original potential, our absolute beauty and gifts that we're designed to be here with, what happens is there's usually an offering to community. It's never usually about us, it's about the larger collective. And when we can offer those gifts, it really enhances a sense of belonging, a sense of community, a sense of connection. So it meets these sort of core needs, and it's a really beautiful experience. So yeah, that's a little chat on imprints. There's a large body of work around this. We in the perinatal training that we offer, we go into depth around like mechanical imprinting, ancestral imprinting, birth imprinting, chemical imprinting. There's a huge amount of dynamics that we work with, and we really go into and explore those things. And that's it's not for the faint-hearted, that's for sure. But if you're someone who holds a lot of curiosity around this stuff, then you might be interested in getting in touch and having a chat about that, because it's beautiful work. And so yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Just having a little early morning contemplation around these imprints that that are kind of like stacked in our early years, and then they become our belief structures in adult life. Maybe a gesture or a posture, lowering of the eyes, might hold a belief behind it around I'm not worthy, or things like that, and self-worth. And so when we can really explore that, and we explore that through what's called somatic practice, or there's all this talk around somatic, and usually the translation is soma equals body, so it's through the body. And there's a lot of research now to support why around the nervous system and all of that, and how these imprints are held undigested within us. But the older understanding of that word soma means the sacred body. So there's always a sense of reverence and awe when we really access things through this beautiful matter. And I guess I'll just leave you with a a little maybe a question that we could maybe live into. It's a bit of a paradigm shift. You know, a lot of the time, particularly in our modern world or in the West, we think of that we or soul is inhabiting us, or that we have some sort of essence within us, deep self. But perhaps our body is inhabiting soul or our deep self. And there's a lot of philosophers and poets and things like that that would talk about that 2/3 of the soul lives outside of the body. You know, and so are we inhabiting soul or psyche, or is psyche inhabiting us, or are we inside consciousness and rather than consciousness being inside us? So that can be a paradigm shift and can be quite liberating actually when we start to look at and be curious around our experiences that way. So I think that's me for now. I'll leave you there, and yeah, if you want to get in touch or more curious about this work, then please feel free to email at weavingsoul.earth or yeah, flick me a message on any of my channels, and yeah, we'll make contact and see what we can cook up together. Okay, bye for now.